All right, good afternoon, everybody. Testing season, standardized testing season is upon us. And that brings all sorts of interesting feelings and stresses, some of which are summarized in the memes which are aligned before you. So we are here to do something about it. We are here to talk about acing standardized tests. You are probably here because you want to see 7 simple ways to supercharge student success. That's what we said in all our marketing materials. We are actually going to provide you with 20 simple ways to supercharge student success to help your students show what they know on those high stakes tests, so that when they finish, they can have that feeling of relief and satisfaction, and maybe even a little bit of excitement, because they know they were able to show what they're truly capable of doing. Before we begin, we've got a couple of things to discuss. Frequently asked questions. First of all, there will be a recording available at the end, so if you want to review anything that we discussed, you can go back and watch the video. We also have a hyperdoc full of valuable resources, another great way to review or to explore more. That's a link that's in the chat box. I just saw it appear, so I know that it is there. And finally, behind the scenes, running our polls, making sure that all tech issues are resolved, we have the one and only Robin. Robin, would you like to say hello to everybody?
Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for joining us today.
All right. We are also going to mention that we are sponsored by Blue Apple Projects. These are absolutely awesome PBL experiences that help your students integrate their academic learning into projects where they're empowered to make the world a better place. Really, at its heart, that's what education is all about. So I hope that you go to blueappleteacher.org and check those out as soon as we're done here. Don't do it now. Wait till we're done, then go to blueappleteacher.org. All right, I also am curious about who is here. So Robin has opened up a poll. If you just want to indicate there, what grade of students do you primarily educate? Robin's going to leave that open for just a couple of seconds because it shouldn't take you too long to decide. And then Robin, when you feel it's appropriate, go ahead and close those out and let us know who we're working with today.
All right, a couple more seconds. They're still rolling in. All right.
What do we got?
All right, Ben. So we are 65% upper elementary, 3-5, and then followed by high school at 17%, lower elementary, K2 at 9%, and middle school at 9%.
Interesting. A lot of 3-5. Those students are just starting to take those standardized assessments. So it's really important to help them understand how to do their best, to help support them in that endeavor. But no matter what grade of students you work with, we're going to have something really valuable for you today. First, a little bit about me. I have been in education for 20 years. I've done all sorts of different things, from doing the teaching to building up my students' understanding of what school can be, to checking that homework, to driving the school bus. I even coached track and field for a long time, which is more than just telling people to run and run faster. It really is about helping people to perform their best in big situations, which connects pretty closely with standardized tests, which helped me become a really good standardized test teacher. I was a pretty good teacher. I helped my students to learn stuff, but I was really good at helping them to show what they knew. So good, in fact, that they had to send people to spy on my students when they were taking the test, just to make sure that they weren't being given the answers by their teacher. It is a little secret in education that there's a big gap between what students show on that test, what's reported on your teacher evaluation or in the newspapers, and what they actually learned. This no-show gap is a big thing, the difference between what they know and what they show. And if we can shrink that, if we can minimize that, we can really help our students to represent their actual understanding. It makes a big difference. Look at those two schools, the blue school and the red school. The blue school is actually knowing more. They're learning more stuff. But if they've got a great big giant gap, then they can't show as well. And so what goes up in the newspaper is not that positive report, but more of a negative report. And we want to avoid that because there are real repercussions tied to these big high stakes tests these days. So let's think about how to minimize that no-show gap with lots of different ideas. For everything that we do with teachers, we try to give them a wide range of options because as a professional, you've got a great feel for what's going to work well and what might not. So I encourage you to pick and choose, take those things which are really resonant with you and put those into practice in your classroom. So, excuse me, we're going to talk about setting the stage. We're going to talk about sound and what soundness has to do with standardized testing. We're going to talk about the power of positivity, how to fill in any gaps in understanding in a really effective way prior to assessment, and then we're going to finish with three biggies, three big ideas we want to make sure to pay attention to before our students hit the testing room. Along the way, some of them are going to be pretty common sense, but some of them are going to be a little bit like that one weird trick that everybody hears about on the internet, but you're going to actually find out the answer here in just a moment. So let's go. Lots of ideas in increasing order of awesomeness. Shameless little way to try and encourage you to stick around all the way to the end, hear all of them. We're going to start with some of the most basic, most foundational, setting the stage. First of all, real simple, temperature matters. If your students are too cold or too hot, it's difficult for them to perform their best. So if we can find an environment that's between that kind of magic range of 68 to 72 degrees, make sure that's Fahrenheit, our students are going to be able to show what they know better than if it's outside that range. Now, you don't always have a lot of control over this, but it is worth thinking about. If you know that that testing environment is going to be outside that range, see if there's anything that you can do to make modifications. Maybe bringing in a heater or a fan, or making an arrangement so that you can take it in an environment where your students can perform their best. In an environment where your students can perform their best. We also want to make sure that we maximize the amount of natural light that's available to students. Students do worse on standardized tests if you make it darker, and they perform especially well if you can get that natural light in. If you are concerned about distractions from having, lots of open blinds and open windows, you can always cover up the bottom half and use the top half to let that light in. Improving the amount of natural light has a proven positive effect on student test performance. You know what else has a positive effect is nature. We do better. We're able to focus more and longer when we're around nature or when we've been exposed to nature. So even something as simple as bringing some plant life into your class or into your testing environment, or taking your students out on a nature walk the morning before the assessment can be really valuable. Think about ways to integrate nature into their day when it's testing season. And another really important factor in helping to establish a great testing environment is quiet. Lots of noise can be distracting. You know that. And so if you're going to be taking a test, this actually happened to me once, and they were doing construction right outside, and there were jackhammers going on the cement, you better believe I got my students some headphones as soon as I could to minimize that as much as possible. It's also really important to think about what students are going to do after they're finished so that they have a quiet activity that they can participate in where the number of disruptions or amount of noise is going to be minimized. So that brings us to our setting the stage poll. I'm curious which ideas you want to try. Which ideas do you think you can put into practice to help improve your students' testing performance? Any of these will have a positive effect. Right? We've done lots of studies into all of these different factors. So any of these that you can do will help your students perform their best. So Robin's going to leave that poll open for just a moment longer. And Robin, why don't you go ahead and close out of that poll and let us know what we're seeing.
All right. So it looks like everyone's going to try all of these, which is great. So the top at 70% is get natural, followed by 63% get natural light, followed by 57% quiet, and 53% set the temp.
Outstanding. Yes, temp is sometimes the one that's the most outside of our control, but if you can, it's valuable. Thinking about getting natural also reminds me that these are great just for helping foster a nice learning environment. So if you've got a room without any plant life, bringing some plant life in can be really beneficial, not just for taking the test, but also for helping your students learn more good. All right, next batch of ideas, sound mind, sound body. strike that, reverse it, sound body, sound mind, helping your students get in the right state of being to really show what they can do. One thing that's really valuable is to just get their blood flowing a little bit. It doesn't have to be exhausting. No marathons, no push-ups to exhaustion, but just some light stretching where they have an opportunity to get moving, get their blood flowing just a little bit will have a proven positive effect on student outcomes. Another great thing to keep in mind is making sure their brains have the fuel that they need in order to show what they can do. So arranging for some low glycemic index snacks, those are some snacks that aren't going to give them a big sugar rush and crash, but which are going to give them sustained fuel, can be really valuable. So you can find glycemic index charts or lists or places where you can look things up on the internet. They're in abundance. They're linked in the hyperdoc. If you send a note home and say, hey, could you send your students with one of these things? Or could you make a donation to our class to help to do this so that our students have the fuel that they need? That can be really beneficial. We don't want our students to be testing in a state where they're sugar crashing or where they're hungry. And you know that our students' diets are sometimes not ideal. So trying to figure out a situation where they can get some low GI snacks, super, super helpful. Here's one of my favorite ones. This one very much feels like one of those one weird tricks because it's about a famous psychological experiment where they gave people sentences to unscramble, like this one in blue. Take a minute and try and unscramble that. One slug slid along a sidewalk. Got it. Or they gave another group of people sentences to unscramble, like this green one. Two sprinters raced around a track. Now, like most psychological experiments, they were not actually assessing people's ability to do the thing that they said that they were assessing. What they were actually doing is then watching those people when they left. And the ones who unscrambled the slow sentences about slow moving things walked away really slowly. And the ones who unscrambled the fast sentences about fast moving things walked away really fast. And it was an illustration of a powerful psychological principle called priming, where you can put people in a certain mode of thinking, which makes them more likely to engage in behaviors after that. And so you can put this into practice to get your students into that sound mind state. I used to give my students just exactly the same thing as that study, some sentences to unscramble, except I gave them sentences that had to do with working hard and focusing and doing their best, right? Sentences that encourage the kind of behavior that I wanted them to do. It was super helpful for me. I always noticed a positive benefit with my second graders, with my fourth graders. So I encourage you to think about whether you want to give that a try. Put your students in that frame of mind with a little subtle priming. Now, one danger associated with standardized tests is stereotype threat. This is where students who are part of a particular group that has a negative stereotype will perform poorly if they're reminded of that stereotype. So we want to counteract that by putting students in a positive frame of mind where they're associating themselves with a group that doesn't have that threat associated with it. So we can do that with stereotype opportunity. What group do all of your students belong to? Well, they belong to your class and to your school. And so if you can help build up this idea that members of your school do really well on these tests, then you can help them have that association when they walk into that testing room. Even if your school is one where those scores tend to be kind of low, you can still pick something out and talk about that one. So you can say, you know, we blow this test out of the water. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, our students work really hard on this particular assessment. In fact, our growth scores in reading last year were some of the highest that we've seen in this area in 10 years. Build up that idea that they belong to a group, that they're a member of an identity that's going to crush this assessment. That way we can help students build up some positive thoughts in their mind before the test. So we've got maybe some common sensey ones. We've got some weird, tricky ones there. I'm curious which ones you would like to try. Robin, can you open that poll up for them, please? All right, let's see. Which of these would you like to try with your students? Some stretching? getting the call out for some low glycemic index snacks, doing some priming exercises, and helping them associate themselves with a group, your class, your school, who's gonna rock this assessment. All right, Robin, when you feel it is appropriate, go ahead and close that out and let us know what we are seeing.
All right, closing out now. All right, 85% priming, followed by 69% get the blood flowing, then 50% low GI snacks, and 46% stereotype opportunity.
Outstanding. Lots of people finding use for these, thinking about ways they can integrate them into their preparation for standardized testing. I'm especially excited to see so many people with a priming one. That one is really clever, but also it's really effective. And so I love that you're thinking outside the box there and willing to try something a little bit different. Now this section of lots of ideas just has a plus, because it's all about the power of positive thinking. How students feel, their well-being when they walk into the testing room has a pretty strong association with how they perform or what they score. So before you take your test, a great principle is to be Captain Positivity. You want to be finding the good in all of your students. You want to be talking about it, building up that they're really looking sharp, looking ready to do their best. You really appreciate the positive things that they're doing. You are so impressed with the way that they X, Y, or Z. You want to be Captain Positivity so that when your students walk in, their well-being scores are nudged up a notch or two, because that will notch their scores up a notch or two. This is not the time to harp on them for little things. This is the time to activate their positivity by being positive yourself. One great way to do this is to collect a list of specific confidences. Keep a list of your students, and then next to each one, start writing down things that you notice where they worked hard, stuck with something, and accomplished something that they were proud of, right? So that way, on testing day, if students are experiencing some difficulty or some stress or some nervousness, you can walk up to them and say, Ned, you are the kid who won that poetry contest. You worked so hard at that. You are a person with persistence. You are a person who is going to stick it out and do your best. I've seen it in you. I know that you can do this. And you've got that concrete reference, something to refer right back to, that they can think, oh yeah, that is true. And I've got a specific example of it to remember. I also have students at some point in time prior to testing season, write a friendly word, a compliment, a build-up for everyone else in the classroom. Then I collect those and I put them together so that each student has a list of positive things. Maybe I select the 5 or 6 or 7 that I think they'll appreciate the most. And so before we go in, they can read those friendly words from their peers. Again, it's all about improving their sense of well-being, because that improves cognitive performance. Now, this is not just a test-taking thing. These same principles apply to learning anything in your class. But if you are really focused on targeting a particular day, that's a great time to pull those friendly words out and increase that student well-being. It's also important to remind our students that they have the power. Nice 80s reference there for me. When they give out big international standardized assessments and they rank those countries out based on how well they performed, the countries that perform the best are the ones that fill out the most bubbles. If you put those two next to each other, the ones that are just willing to sit down, stick with it, get all the way to the finish, put their best work in, those are the ones that do the best. To a large extent, what's getting measured on those standardized assessments is students' willingness to work hard, to finish everything, to practice their best test-taking skills. It's all about things that students can control. And so reminding students that they're in control, helping them see that they can be successful, that's a really positive thing to keep in mind. It's great to remind students that largely how well they do on this assessment is up to them, that they can choose success. making that internal locus of control where they can make things happen can be a really positive thing that can increase the degree to which they work hard and consequently will increase how well they perform. And when it comes to positivity, trying stuff out can be really positive. Peppermints are something that's kind of floating out there as a mood enhancer. So giving a student a peppermint can be a great thing. And even if it doesn't work, even if it doesn't kind of work in a randomized, double-blind controlled study kind of fashion, the fact that people believe that it works can be important in and of itself. So don't be afraid to try stuff out, because even if it's not that great of an idea, the placebo effect can still help students feel confident and in control. All right, I am curious about these ideas. Let's open that poll up. Which of these will you put to work in your class for your students? Activating positivity by being Captain Positive. Collecting those specific confidences that you can share, especially if a student is feeling a lack of confidence. Friendly word warm-up. Reminding them that they have the power to decide how well they'll do based on how hard they work. Or busting out some peppermints or other placebos. All right, Robin, whenever you are ready, you can close that thing out and we'll see what we've got.
All right. Results are in, and it looks like obviously all great ideas that are going to be tried by everybody. So 70% activate positivity and specific confidences, followed by 63% friendly words warm up, and then 59% you have the power, and 44% placebos and peppermints.
Great, 40% or above for every single one of those. And I just am a huge believer in the power of positivity for testing season, but also throughout the school year. If you can focus on the positive, that positive reinforcement tends to be what increases behavior the most effectively. And so if you're paying attention to the positive things, then you can really help your students perform better academically, behaviorally. All right, we know that there might be some things that you're a little nervous about coming into the test. You want to try and fill some of those gaps, maybe something that you learned way back at the beginning of the year and you're not sure if they're going to remember it. A couple of ideas for learning activities you can do in the few weeks before the assessment to help students really be able to remember, to own those things that you learned a while ago. One of them is the brain dump. You can just ask them, write down everything that you know about X, Y, or Z. All right, so if you might have forgotten about electricity or something, you can say, write down everything that you remember about electricity or everything you remember about adding fractions. The act of pulling things back from the memory is one of the greatest ways to solidify those memories, to make it easier for them to pull those things back on testing day. So doing a brain dump, have them write it down physically with their hands, not to type it out. Writing things out can really help solidify them in memory as well. And then talk it out with a partner or with a small group. Verbalizing what they remember also really helps solidify it. Plus, it gives them an opportunity to correct any misunderstandings or to raise any misunderstandings up so that you can address those as a class. So just a simple brain dump activity doesn't require any extra work on your part. Just thinking about those things that you're worried they might have forgotten and have them practice remembering it. Writing it down, talking it out, that is really powerful. You can also do this in a couple of different places. Move to a particular spot of the room or do it in a different place in the school. It's easier for us to pull those things back from our memory if we can associate them with a place. You might have heard this study recommendation to study different topics in different rooms or areas of the room. The same thing can be applied to you, even if you do a different seating chart for reviewing one thing and then the other. It's easier for us to pull things back from our memory when we learn them, when we can remember where we learned them or where we reviewed them. Now, this is something that you can do any point in time throughout the year, but it's great for specifically reviewing things that you want them to remember for that test. It's also really nice to visualize success. So speaking of venues, going to the place where you're going to take that assessment. If it's in your room, trying to set things up the way they're going to look on testing day so that it's easy for them to get a picture. And you can talk them through it and say, I want you to visualize sitting there having a tough question, working hard, having success. Visualizing things is a great way to help actualize those things when that big moment comes. All of these are really about combating that phenomenon that we've all had where we've got something on the tip of our tongue. We remember it back there somewhere. Well, we want to help students be able to bring that right back up through things like venue variety or brain dumps, or just visualizing themselves pulling that back from their memory. Let's open this poll up. Robin, go ahead. We've got just a couple minutes and a couple of ideas left, but I am super curious. Which of these will you use? Real quick, make your choices. Brain dumps where you write it out. Talking about what they've learned with their peers. Learning in a variety of venues, or even visualizing in that specific venue where you're going to be taking your test. Robin, when you are ready, go ahead and close those out.
All right, we have a couple more seconds as they roll in.
All right.
All right. So 90% brain dump, followed by 52% talk it out, followed by 38% venue variety, and 31% venue visit.
Wow, brain dump. It's one of my favorite strategies, period. If we want to remember stuff, we have to practice remembering it. And so you can use this at the beginning, the middle, or the end of a unit of study, and you can certainly use it to help review things prior to that big high stakes test. All right, 3 final things we'll want to pay attention to. One is that seating chart. I love this kind of group work setup. I did lots of collaborative work, but it's terrible for testing, right? So many distractions around, so many ways to get pulled off of task. So many times where we're close to another student or we're looking directly at another student. Those are recipes for disaster. Doing something like a U shape is a little better. Not as many people who are right next to, but there's still lots of people in our line of sight that are looking right back at us. So things like rows and columns are much better for standardized tests because it just minimizes distractions. They've got to do this by themselves, and that's where rows and columns shine. You can be creative. Think about ways to flex things up. Here we've got 2 rows facing one way, 2 rows facing another way, offset a little bit. Think about trying to get students farther apart and minimize the number of times they're staring right at somebody else. You can be creative at that. You can have students looking toward the outside of the U. You can use spots of your room that you ordinarily wouldn't. Sometime you're going to figure out something where you feel like, hey, we're in mode green here. This is really successful at getting students spread out and not looking straight at each other. We also want to teach our students some basic test taking skills. Teach them to terminate the terrible answers. If there's some things that they know it can't be, get rid of those. It makes your guesses much more effective. And remember, if you're really torn, go with your gut. Provided that you've thought it out and that you've strategized by getting rid of those answers, if it is a last resort, going with your gut is a great way to do it. And if students have confidence in that, again, it can help them be confident with the whole assessment. So my hope is that you found some things here that you want to put into practice, because every single one of them has research behind it that helps improve student cognition, which is going to help your class, your school, level up their performance on these high stakes assessments. And that does matter. It does have an impact. If you liked our time together today, I would love to connect with you in more depth. You can go to blueappleteacher.org and look for our Flex PD options. We've got tons of different ways that we can meet your needs, and we're a nonprofit organization, so we can meet your budget as well. Check that out for sure, because there's nothing I love more than connecting with teachers and with schools. Make sure that you go to bit.ly/keeplearning, learning's all capital there, to go to our next webinar, next free webinar, Building Engineering into Your Curriculum. I would love to also hear your ideas. We got a lot of teachers out there. If you've got a pro testing tip, email it to me at ben.tulsma@vai.org. I will pick one of those people who sends an email and give you one of our free Blue Apple projects. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that you can go back and put this into practice in your classroom and help your students have that wonderful feeling that they have aced the test. Have a wonderful afternoon.